Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior English B, and we're continuing with our conversation regarding Virginia Woolf, the great novelist, writer, on 1198. We're going to look just for a moment from one of Virginia Woolf's most famous novels, Mrs. Dalloway. And I want to point out a couple of things real quickly about this reading. You're going to want to write this down now in your annotations before we actually get to the reading. Mrs. Dalloway takes place in, the first thing you want to write down is 1923. So write that down. Takes place in 1923. We are in London, England. And it tells the story of a woman named Clarissa Dalloway. All right? She spends the day preparing for a party. Okay? Now, we're going to have a parallel character here. Septimius, a World War I veteran, who suffers from the mental illness he developed in the aftermath of the war, what we call sometimes post-traumatic stress syndrome. Are you familiar? As the day progresses, Clarissa has an encounter with an ex-suitor, someone that she used to love, and questions her marriage. During her party, when Clarissa learns that Septimius committed suicide, she contemplates whether or not he was right in committing the act. Now, I think I've given you enough biography about Virginia Woolf to know what's ironic about the fact that this would be a consideration of Mrs. Dalloway. How does Virginia Woolf die? Yes, she does commit suicide herself. The story frequently bounces, and this is an important part of stream of consciousness. You want to write this down. This is an example of stream of consciousness writing. The story frequently moves or bounces from one point of view to another, and it uses free, indirect discourse, a technique by which the writer describes the thoughts of characters using third-person singular pronouns. Mrs. Dalloway, one of Virginia Woolf's most well-known and celebrated stories. This excerpt is the opening scene of the novel. So here we go. I want you to just listen and follow along. We've got about a 4.5-minute reading is all of this great novel.
Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, for Lucy had her work cut out for her. The doors would be taken off their hinges. Rumpelmeyer's men were coming. And then, thought Clarissa Dalloway, what a morning, fresh as if issued to children on a beach. What a lark! What a plunge! For so it had always seemed to her when, with a little squeak of the hinges, which she could hear now, she had burst open the French windows and plunged at Burton into the open air. How fresh! How calm! Stiller than this, of course. The air was in the early morning. Like the flap of a wave, the kiss of a wave, chill and sharp, and yet, for a girl of 18 as she then was, solemn, feeling as she did, standing there at the open window, that something awful was about to happen. Looking at the flowers, at the trees with the smoke winding off them and the rooks rising, falling, standing and looking until Peter Walsh said, musing among the vegetables, "Was that it? I prefer men to cauliflowers. Was that it?" He must have said it at breakfast one morning when she had gone out onto the terrace. Peter Walsh. He would be back from India one of these days, June or July, she forgot which, for his letters were awfully dull. It was his sayings one remembered, his eyes, his pocket knife, his smile, his grumpiness, and, when millions of things had utterly vanished, how strange it was, a few sayings like this about cabbages. She stiffened a little on the curb, waiting for Dirtnall's van to pass. A charming woman, Scrope Purvis thought her, knowing her as one does know people who live next door to one in Westminster. A touch of the bird about her, of the jay, blue-green, light, vivacious, though she was over 50 and grown very white since her illness. There she perched, never seeing him, waiting to cross, very upright. For having lived in Westminster, how many years now? Over 20. One feels, even in the midst of the traffic, or waking at night, Clarissa was positive. A particular hush, or solemnity, an indescribable pause, a suspense. But that might be her heart, affected, they say, by influenza, before Big Ben strikes. There, out it boomed. First a warning, musical, then the hour, irrevocable. The leaden circles dissolved in the air. Such fools we are, she thought, crossing Victoria Street. For heaven only knows why one loves it so, how one sees it so, making it up, building it round one, tumbling it, creating it every moment afresh. But the veriest frumps, the most dejected of miseries, sitting on doorsteps, drink their downfall, do the same. Can't be dealt with, she felt positive, by acts of parliament for that very reason. They love life. In people's eyes, in the swing, tramp and trudge, in the bellow and the uproar, the carriages, motor cars, omnibuses, vans, sandwich men shuffling and swinging, brass bands, barrel organs, in the triumph and the jingle and the strange high singing of some aeroplane overhead was what she loved. Life. London. This moment of June. Shake.
Now, when we look at the ending of this reading, again, this is just the introduction. Notice how the view of this speaker comes to this final, dare we call it an epiphany. What does that mean? What's an epiphany? Does anyone know that term? What's an epiphany? It's an insight, isn't it? Like an aha moment. What is the epiphany that she makes at the very end of this reading? It's right there on 1200. What is it that she realizes? All the stuff of her life, and it's what? What is it? What does she say? In the triumph and the jingle and the strange high singing of some aeroplane overhead was what she loved. Colon. Life. Colon. London. Colon. This moment of June. Jot down in 2B real quickly. What's fascinating about the prose language that she uses? This could almost be considered what? Right, poetry, huh? Could almost be considered poetry. What is it that she comes to realize in this moment about her life? In the middle of all the stuff, it's almost like a realization. Oh, all of this simple stuff is life. And I love that. And I love that. On 1201, Michael Cunningham, an American writer, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, writes about how reading this novel, Mrs. Dalloway, had a powerful effect on him. As you read through this, you'll want to be able to answer the question at the very bottom of the page at 1201. What did Cunningham as a writer learn from reading Virginia Woolf? This is an important moment for us in our lit class to make this observation. Yeah, I get it. You're reading this stuff so you can pass the test or whatever. But every once in a while, a student is so impressed by something that he or she reads that it has an effect on his or her life for the rest of his or her life. That can actually happen for some students when they read a powerful text. For Cunningham, this was this novel, Lady Dalloway. Thank you.